Welcome to 9 to 5 Cooking. We're going to talk about one of my favorite recipes today. It's all about comfort cooking, and this is pot roast. Now, the beautiful thing about pot roast is that you can make it without looking it up. It's so simple, there's so few ingredients that it's something that you can throw together pretty quickly. It is a great slow cooker thing. So if you're working all day, throw it in the slow cooker, let it go all day, and it's perfect every single time. So there's varying degrees of things. The measurements really just depend on what the size of your crock pot is, how many people you're feeding, the size of your chuck roast, etc. So I'm going to give you some general, things to go by here, but in the end, this is one of those things you got to make it your own, and your family will actually really, really love it. Okay, so what's great about this recipe is that there's only a few ingredients that we have to worry about here. I've got a rustic chopped carrots here. This is about 3 pounds of carrots. It's a lot, and I'll tell you why. This is going to be our side when it comes to the pot roast. So you want enough to be able to give everybody a good healthy amount of vegetables per plate. So think about how many people you have and how many carrots you need, and chop up that much. These are peeled and just kind of roughly chopped. Since they're going to be cooking low and slow all day long, you don't have to worry so much about proportion when it comes to these. But typically when you get carrots done, you want to make sure that they're all uniform in size so they cook at the same time. But we're going all day, so it's all right there. I have 2 yellow onions here that have been sliced. You can see that they're kind of thinly sliced, but this really depends on, if your kids don't want to see onions, you could dice them. If somebody really likes onions, you can actually keep them whole, whatever you prefer. We've also got 2 cups of beef broth here. I've got some fresh rosemary because it actually grows wild here in the city that we live in, but you can use dried if you'd like. I would just use a couple tablespoons to kind of make up for it not being fresh. This is a 3.5 pound chuck roast, and then I've got some spice mix here that I'm going to use on the meat. And this is about a tablespoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper. What we've got over here is a hot, really, really hot cast iron pan, and I put about probably 3 or 4 tablespoons of olive oil here. We want this really, really hot because what we're going to be doing is searing some of this before it goes into our crock pot, which I have here. If you have like a Dutch oven or a large pot, you can do it in that all day. It doesn't need to be a crock pot. It just depends. I would not use a pot in the oven all day if you're not going to be home. So it's kind of a hazard. If you're not going to be home, use a crock pot. If you are going to be home, you can use the oven. That's fine. So we're going to get our pan nice and hot, and we're going to start with the veggies. You don't really have to do this step, but it just adds a little bit of depth of flavor. So I'm going to start with the carrots. And we're not cooking these. We're just going to kind of sear them a little bit, make them happy. This will take about a minute or 2. Okay, the carrots have been going for a few minutes, and I'm going to just kind of see that there's a little bit of browning going on. Just kind of what we want. Just a little bit of a sear. And I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to put them in this crock pot here. I'm going to get a little closer. As my Scottish friend would say, they're really greasy. All right, the next thing is going to be our onions. Go right in there. These are not going to go for very long. Not as long as the carrots, obviously, because they're not as thick. I thinly slice these. So if you have chunkier onions cut, then you can have them go for a bit. But I'm just going to do a good 30, 40 seconds. I'm cooking these onions at a pretty high heat, which is why I'm moving them around. The reason it's on high is because when I put the meat in here, I want it to sear it. Like, I don't want it to cook the meat. I want it to sear the heck out of the outside. And what that does is while it's cooking in the crock pot, it actually like holds in that seal. That sear creates a seal, and it holds in all of the moisture in the meat, so keeps it from drying out too much. So it's a really, really important step, and that is why my pan is on high right now. All right. If you'll notice, my oil that I started with is completely gone, and we want to kind of re-oil this before we put the finale in, our meat. So another couple of tablespoons of olive oil, and while that gets nice and hot, we're gonna season our meat. What I like to do to make less of a mess is keep the chuck roast in the butcher paper that it comes in while you season it. That way you don't get, salt all over the place. So I'm gonna bring this guy out here. Now here's the thing. Since we're going to be cooking this all day, all this fat right here is gonna render. And so we don't really have to worry about it too much. This is quite a thick piece of fat right here. I don't usually have that when I do this. So I'm just gonna kind of trim that off a little bit. Normally, if I cook like a stir fry or something, I get rid of all of this fat, but since it's cooking all day, it's fine. Any large chunks like that you can get rid of, but everything else in between is actually gonna turn into flavor. Fat is flavor. My pan is smoking here, so I'm gonna turn him down a little bit. He's a little crazy. Again, this is my mixture of salt, garlic powder, and pepper, and this is just kind of season the outside and help create that crust when we do the very hot sear. So we're gonna do this pretty liberally, right? You want kind of a skin to form. So we're gonna do a nice thickness here. And I might not use all of this. You can always make more if you need more, depending on the size of your meat. And you can kind of switch this up too if you want, but I wouldn't suggest using any kind of herbs because the herbs will burn during the sear. So salt, cumin, paprika, any dried spice like that would just be fine here. But I like to keep it simple. Salt, pepper, and garlic powder. That's where it's at. All meat ever needs. I'm just doing a quick rub down. I'm gonna go back on the side because it kind of soaks into there. Get around the edges a little bit. All right, okay, we're good to go here. And I'm gonna put this guy in my pan. And if it's nice and hot, he's gonna scream. There we go. I don't know if you can hear that. Pretty good sizzle, that's exactly what we want. Now we don't want to move that. It's gonna stay there for a minute or two. I'm gonna just take a look at him and see. Oh yeah, he's ready to go. I'm gonna flip this guy. Look at that beautiful sear. Can you see that? It's gorgeous. That's exactly what you want. Do you see how it creates like this hard skin, this crust around there? That's exactly what you want. We're gonna go on the other side for another couple minutes, and then we'll be ready to put him in the crock pot. I'm gonna bring this crock pot over here, and if you take a look, we can see our beautiful onions and our carrots. And we need to make enough room for a 3.5 pound chuck roast. So I'm just gonna make a little hole here. And all these flavors are gonna meld together as they cook all day long. It smells so good right now. You can smell the grilled onion and the crust on the meat. So we're gonna take, you can see now we've got a beautiful crust on both sides. Now just to reiterate, the crust helps keep all the moisture inside the meat and keeps the meat from drying out. So this is really important. But because it's cooking all day and we're gonna like shred it a little bit at the end, this hardness of the crust does not make a difference except during the cooking process where it retains all of that moisture. So this is a beautiful piece of meat. Smells delicious. All right, last couple steps here before we actually put it on our crock pot is some beef broth here. This is 2 cups of beef broth. We're not making a soup, so we don't need a lot of liquid, but if you don't put any liquid in here, it's gonna be really dry. So we got enough liquid for all this stuff to kind of cook and meld together. It's also gonna braise those carrots, so you got really flavorful, soft carrots by the end of this, and the onions will pretty much disintegrate. The last step, I'm not gonna use all of this, but I'm gonna use about this much of the rosemary here, and that's just gonna hang out on top. And as the steam goes in there, it's gonna soak into the meat, and it's gonna be awesome. So our lid's gonna go on our crock pot, and we're gonna set this on low for 6 to 8 hours. If you don't have that much time, you can put it on high for 4 hours. It just depends on how much time you have. I like this to go all day. It tastes so much better when it goes all day. So if you can swing it, then do that. We'll be back in 6 to 8 hours. Okay, so it's been 6 to 8 hours, and we're gonna bring our pot roast over from the crock pot. Okay, here we go. Nice and sizzly. Take a look at that. It smells delicious. My favorite thing about cooking with a crock pot is the whole house smelling as great as it did. So we haven't touched anything. It's just been hanging out all the time. You can see the rosemary's kind of wilted here. I'm just gonna grab that rosemary out, because it's done its job. We don't need it anymore. And now we're going to take out the meat and shred it up. Now, some people like to slice it. Because I cook it all day, it pretty much falls apart. So what I like to do is to get a Pyrex dish like this and shred the meat with 2 forks. Let's see if I can get it in there without making a mess here. Make sure we got all of our big pieces of meat. Just carrots and onions in there. And I'm gonna put this off to the side. So what I like to do is try and shred this meat up and get a little bit of this fat off to the side. So I generally just kind of go at it with 2 forks. Depending on how long you went is how gentle you have to be. Again, any large pieces of fat I like to leave out. Nobody likes chomping into a big old piece of fat. Well, some people do, I think. It's not like pulled pork where you have to shred it a lot, but we're just getting like, bite-sized pieces. And so, I mean, my biggest concern here is just to get the big pieces of fat out. And then we're gonna put it back in the juice, kind of like an au jus. Let it soak up some juice before we serve. All right, so we got all that shredded. Some big pieces in here. So the easiest thing to do is get a slotted spoon to serve your carrots and onion mixture here. So we want to get some of the juice back in this meat though, so I'm going to actually ladle some from one to another. The reason I'm putting the juice back in with the meat here, it's kind of rehydrated a little bit after shredding. It also keeps it nice and warm while you're serving the rest of this. So some people make pot roast where they add the potatoes into the cook. I dislike doing that, mostly because I cook it for a very long time and the potatoes just disintegrate and you get this like weird soupy mixture. So for me, what I like to do is make mashed potatoes and then serve the carrots and the meat along with the mashed potatoes. I find that it's a lot more delicious than cooking those potatoes all day long. So that's me, but you can add potatoes if you'd like. Okay, I'm gonna show you how we plate this. So I've got some mashed potatoes here. I'm going to put a big old thingy of that here. Nice creamy mashed potatoes. And what I like to do is grab a good size amount of the meat and put it right next to that mashed potatoes, like so. And then we're gonna do some carrots and onions and put those there. A few more. And this is what you end up with: pot roast, carrots, and mashed potatoes. Super comfort food. Let's take a bite here. It's a little hot. So the meat is super tender. It's absolutely delicious. The mashed potatoes are creamy. The carrots fall apart in your mouth. It's really, really, really good. Serve it with like a side salad or something, and you're good to go. But I don't have any red wine because I drank it all. My hair look okay?